This is Louie Zumbach with Rush Hour Ag. Leave your message after the tone.
Hey, Louie, it's Elliott and Henderson. Can't wait to tell you about
rolling down the back road, truth riding with the dust, talking agriculture policy with people you can trust. From the field to the Capitol, we're breaking it down. Real talk, real issues from a real farm town. Every hour's rush hour when the work won't leave, so we're cutting through the noise and setting things straight.
What's your rush today, Elliott? Well, welcome back to another exciting broadcast of Rush Hour Ag, a podcast in conjunction with Farm for Profit, where we dive into ag policy that affects your operation. I'm your host, Louie Zumbach, along with
Elliott Henderson.
And today we have a special guest. It's Iowa State Senator Dan Zumbach from Ryan, Iowa.
Hi, Louie.
How you doing, Dan?
Any relation between the two of you?
Like I said in one of the first podcasts, if your last name is Zumbach, you're probably related. Dan and I are distant cousins. Our nearest relative is our
great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Yeah.
But we grew up around each other in the Ryan-Coggin area and know each other quite well. All of Dan's good ideas come from me. Just kidding. Well, not really, but hey, you know. Anyway, excited for you to be here, Dan. A little intro on you. You've been married to your wife, Michelle, for 41 years.
Correct.
She told me the other day it felt like 15 minutes underwater.
She would say that, yes.
No, she didn't say that, but you got to make something up. You've been farming 41 years as well.
Correct.
So that's exciting. Started out with whites.
I did.
And moved to the John Deere.
That is correct.
Yep.
You know me well. We didn't even rehearse that, Louie.
Well, you know, we grew up real similarly. We started out with whites, and we now have John Deeres and a few Case IH. So.
You guys rehearsed this before we came?
We
Not a
did
bit.
not.
Dan and I have always played off each other quite well, so hopefully it goes good in the broadcast here. So you got 4 children.
Correct.
One of which farms with you.
Correct.
And 9.5 grandkids. So tell us about that.
Oh, it's wonderful. You know, you loved your kids, and then they start generating grandkids, and you didn't know you could love something more than your children, but you really can love your grandchildren more. It's a great experience. But a new one coming in July, so we have 9 in the ground and 1 on the way.
All right, well, that's cool, and I can't agree more with you. Plus, you can send them home.
Correct.
You can get them all riled up, and okay, see you later.
Yep.
So so that's exciting. You've been in the Iowa Senate for 12 years.
That is right.
And your district recently changed with redistricting.
Yeah, so I represent 5 counties. I used to have Delaware, Jones, Buchanan, and Lynn, and now I have part of Dubuque, all of Delaware, all of Buchanan, and most of Fayette, a little bit I don't have, and a big northeast corner of Blackhawk.
Okay, so your geography got a lot bigger.
Got bigger and moved north and west, and I lost kind of my southerly part.
Sure. Kind of a neat little fun fact was when I was in the House, you were my senator.
You're right again, Louie.
And so you had, if you lived in our districts, your representative and your senator were both Zumbachs.
Yeah, it was kind of fun during that campaign season, Louie, where there were Zumbach signs everywhere, and they were either red or blue. No one probably knew which one was which, but they were everywhere.
Yeah, they were, and that was pretty exciting. So before we get diving into this, you got any?
Yeah, so we're an agricultural-based podcast, and I'd like to ask you, Dan, what was one of your earliest memories of agriculture when you were growing up that inspired you to get involved in agriculture?
Sure. I grew up the youngest of 7 children, and probably my most vivid memory as a young child is I had an amazing sandbox that was made out of what I would call a really sandy soil, not sand like you'd have today, but it's sandy soil. And it was back behind an old chicken house. And I can remember my dad being in the dairy barn, and he'd yell my name, and I'd come running out around the corner from that old chicken house and dirty knees and young enough that I had to wipe all the sand off my butt and my hands, whatever, to go feed baby calves. But I can still visualize myself just jumping at that voice and running down to the dairy barn to help do chores.
So that's an awesome story.
And it's been good. When you're the youngest of 7, my oldest brother is 12 years older than me, and it was kind of like having 2 dads. Dad was a dad, but my older brother was kind of like the fun dad. He'd let me do those things that my dad wouldn't let me do. But it was a joy working around with the 3 of us as I was the younger one coming up in, and I had all good experiences.
Well, that's great, and I believe you did. It's similar to my family, where my brother's I believe 14 years older than me, but kind of similar thing. He's kind of a fill-in father.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, it's kind of neat to have that. So well, I guess we'll dive right in. We're going to talk about topics that are affecting agriculture, and I know that currently you are the transportation chair,
That's correct.
but you were a long time ag chair.
Right. I still sit on the Ag Committee. I chaired the Ag Committee for 6 years, and now I'm chairing the transportation, which I really enjoy because so much of agriculture is tied to transportation. Whether you're moving livestock around or moving grain around, it's a viable part. We like that good infrastructure to get all our commodities moved in and out, and I really enjoy the transportation side of it.
Okay. As long as we're on transportation, just curious about this. The governor anymore extends the proclamation quite a bit. Our trucks are licensed up with the bill that I believe you ran, where you could buy extra tonnage, and that's what we done on our farm. But is that going to be a continued thing where she just extends it for most? It's almost most of the year anymore. How she extends it.
Well, that's a prerogative of the governor, and it's probably the one things that her and I have talked about a few times. We wanted this tool out there where we know we're short of drivers, we're short of trucks, we have more commodities to move, but we want to take care of our roads. Right. And so we came up with this permit process where for an extra $500, which is substantial, but in the bigger scope, it's a pretty good insurance policy where you could haul 1,000 bushels without being felt like you have to run down and get just the right kernel in your truck. You could run it up to 80-some thousand pounds, less than 90,000, and get 1,000 bushels on the road and get them going. And it's been very well received, very much appreciated. But the governor has given us about half the year for free. And so I think since we have this in place, I'd like to see that proclamation maybe be very limited and let the permit process do what it's supposed to do so we take care of our roads.
Sure.
Has there been any issues with, certain factions of Iowa that are opposed to that where we're having problems with roads, or has it all been very positive?
It's been very, very positive. The only negative that I hear inconsistently is some trucking companies haul by the load, not by the weight. And so the folks that haul their products by the load, they get paid the same whether they're weighing 50,000 or 80,000. They're getting paid per load. So they don't like the concept that they may have to haul heavier when they could have got paid for less and have another load.
Sure.
So that's the only group of folks that I've seen that have been somewhat resistant to it. But everybody else, when you're struggling finding drivers and the time and the energy, they like carrying that extra 10%. And then I appreciate, as someone that represents the entire state of Iowa, let's throw that $500 in there to help keep the roads up.
Like county engineers, those types of folks, they're on board with this too.
Well, there was some resistance because we know heavier loads wear the roads out quicker. But when it comes right down to it, they helped me design how this bill should look and how it should work. So they came on board, not running pom-poms and singing the song, but saying, okay, let's try to do this right. And it took about 3 years to get all the language correct. We came out the first year, we saw a couple problems, we fixed that language, had another little problem, fixed that language. I think we're good now.
Well, that's kind of the cool thing about government, and people work together to usually accomplish a goal and make society better. And I think that's a good story of how you had to work with local people to come up to a solution to make something work.
Well,
for the rest of
I'll
Iowa.
spin off of that just a little bit, Elliot. Just today, I worked with a House member on a bill to make it easier to be a school bus driver.
Okay.
And the recruitment of school bus drivers is hard. It's a difficult job. The timing is terrible, and getting that school bus certificate is expensive, challenging, and it's hard to fill. So we work together to make that simpler, something the schools appreciate, to make it less expensive and simpler, and yet still have a safe driver and a qualified driver to move our kids around. And we sat for an hour and a half together. He had a bill that was similar to mine. I had one similar to his. We figured out how to blend them together, and we shook hands after an hour and a half conversation, and we think we're going to get it passed.
That's nice. That's nice. The weight bill, can be different per county. Not every county has to do it. Or did that change?
They all have to do it by the middle of this year.
Okay.
So it was coming up to time. They could exempt themselves up until July 1 of 2025, but now they all have to participate. Now, it was a poor choice in my opinion, because if you didn't participate up till now, your county, where a lot of that fee stayed in the county,
right,
but that money was divided over the participating counties. So if you had truck owner in your county that was paying that extra $500, part of that $500 should have stayed in your county, but since they weren't participating, it went to the counties that did participate. So they shot themselves in the foot if they didn't participate.
Yeah, I was a supervisor at the time for Lynn County, and we jumped on board pretty early. It does not exempt you from the bridges. You know, if you have a weight limit on a bridge, that doesn't do anything for that, and it doesn't extend. It does count on state highways and interstates.
No, you have to stay off the interstate.
You have to stay off the interstate. Okay.
But the counties can give you a set of roads that they want you to stay off. So you have an opportunity to take the most direct route. But if there happens to be a bridge or a road situation that's not acceptable, they can say you need to take Route B, which I think is a good idea.
Sure.
And if I remember right, when that was going about, a lot of they had some town halls or forums about that, and maybe traffic. People had an opportunity to speak up locally in those counties to try to identify them routes. Is that right?
I think there was a lack of misunderstanding of what it really was. So, Elliott, if you wanted to take off out of your yard, you had the right to leave your gravel road, get to the nearest farm to market road, to the nearest state road. And you kind of had to take that route where maybe the shortest was over here, but the most direct route on farm to market roads and state roads might have been going this direction.
Gotcha.
So you would have to sit down and say, Elliott, this is your most direct route to get on the proper roads.
Some of the misunderstanding might have been where somebody knew that this was the most direct way, but there was a path that was already identified that they needed to take.
Correct.
It may have maybe taken them a little bit further than they normally would have went.
Correct. And that's something that we'll work on the whole time as this process moves in. But big picture, I think it's been good policy for agriculture.
Yeah, I agree, because I don't have to worry now near as much whether the guys are a little over, because we don't have a scale on the farm. When we're actually in the fall, we do real well because everything's scaled with the cart.
Right.
But hauling to town now during the winter and spring months, we got air gauges in the truck, of course, but this just helps if you're a little off. I pay the up for the tags, and well worth it on our farm, I feel.
Well, all three of us have loaded enough trucks that when it was 80,000, I mean, you were watching that too, by your watch, by your airbags, by the height on the trailer, and you're trying to nail that 80,000, and you'd be so disappointed if you weighed 78. So then you try to bring it up. The next time you went, it was 82, and my Lord, you were just wrestling with that the whole time. Now you just put enough in that you know you're okay, and you take off. It just got rid of a headache for everyone.
That's for sure. Well, next on a big topic in Iowa that affects farmers, affects everyone, is property taxes. So can you give us an idea of what's going on? I know I've been told it changes daily, so it probably changed today again. But can you give us a rough idea of what's going on with the property tax bill?
So it's going to be rough, Louie, and so anything I say here, it's not a quotable quote. So I want to make sure that's where we're at. But big picture for agriculture, your property taxes will go down with the new system. Okay. I'm just going to make that as a general blanket statement. Your per acre cost will go down. Now, on your farm buildings, most of them will go down. Some may go up. So this is where it gets a little sticky. One of the questions we have right now that we don't have resolved, if you're building new buildings into the future, the property taxes on that might be higher than the property taxes on the buildings you're already having that you already have in service.
So
that's things we're working on.
There's been a lot of talk about this here in the last couple of weeks. The concern is, for future growth in that industry, is this going to curb expansion of people wanting to build new hog buildings, new farm facilities?
I think that's a fair concern, because one of the avenues we've used historically to get that next generation moved into agriculture is livestock, and livestock take buildings. And if this would disincentivize that next generation from building a building because the property taxes are exorbitant, that's a disincentive. And so we have to really be careful on that we don't get it to where folks are going to decline from wanting to build new livestock facilities, because it's a great asset to agriculture is having livestock around.
So how do they? So there's a rollback part of this too, or there has been in agriculture. Could you explain to the listeners kind of how property taxes work, or how they assess these property taxes, and then what we're going to do different in the future?
Now you're going to get into the weeds that are probably not defined yet.
Okay.
So this bill is still sitting out there getting moved around. And so I'm probably not in a position to really share how it's going to be shaped, because I don't know. It's not that I don't want to share, it's just I don't know.
How about traditionally, or how it has been in the past, just real briefly?
So in the past, if you back the train up, there was this constant rollback concept trying to make property tax easier on on livestock facilities. And so even though it's valued at X, they'd roll back the value to X minus and then tax you on that. But what we have to really remember is when you wash it all out and you look at that number at the bottom of the page, the number we hate, which is the tax bill, that's determined locally. Okay, your local school boards making decisions how much is going to the school, your local city councils are determining how much goes to your city, and your local county supervisors are determining how much goes to your county. And no matter how you value stuff, they can change how much they mill off of that value. And that's what we have to make sure we watch, is sure that they can't take exorbitant amounts of millage off of our various buildings or facilities or land that we have.
Is that the same thing as like their levy rate? Those communities levy
Yes.
rates?
Yeah.
Levy rate, millage rate, they call them different things, but that's what it really amounts to. And sometimes they all want to blame the state for your property taxes going up. And quite often the state sets some policy on how you have to value your various properties. But when it comes right down to it, those local authorities, 3 different levels of them, will say, well, how much are we going to take off of each one of those different areas of property?
Right. So who is it? The assessor that decides what the value of your home is or farm site?
So generally, yes, that is the most forward strain answer is yes, the assessor side decides that. But the assessors are also boxed in a little bit because they cannot devalue things less than they're really worth. And that's dictated by the state, because what we don't want is an assessor to come in there and say, well, we're going to make all your property worth less to lower your property tax, and suddenly your school is running very short on funds because someone is showing a very low value on your property. So there's some guidelines dictated by the state on what property should be valued
That might be something you'd want to do too if you want to get reelected.
Is which?
lower them taxes.
Well, absolutely.
But-
Go ahead, Lee.
Well, my problem with the assessor doing that is it doesn't give any credence to the person that done the building. For instance, if I was to be building a new house, for instance, and you were building a new house and Elliott was, we could have the exact same floor plan and have 3 totally different values. Because maybe I pour my own cement.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you do your own dirt work. Maybe Elliott builds the whole thing himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think somewhere I would like to see, if it was Louie's wish list, that what you actually spend on your facilities can be brought into the equation. And one reason is my grain site. Last year they raised my grain site, and you've been to both of you have been to my house, and I have a fairly large grain site, most of which the guys and I went and tore down somewhere else and brought back to my house and put back up. I bought them bins for pennies on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
But yet it didn't want to show up on my property taxes that way, because they just take a generic, okay, it's this big around, it's this tall, it cost you this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's exactly in my opinion, it's not it should take into consideration what I actually spent on it.
So I don't disagree with you, Louie. Okay, I'm gonna say that outwardly, but here's the problem that comes into play is the assessors are supposed to use a comparative system so that they don't get something undervalued. That's what they're told to use. So I'll take right what you said. So I built a house nearly 15 years ago, and it cost X, and it's valued now nearly twice what I paid for that house. And I said, how did you come up for that number? Because no one would pay me for that house where it sits. If that home was sitting in a city of Manchester or Independence or one of the homes that I represent, it might be worth that. But it's sitting out in the middle of a grain setup on a gravel road, and no one will pay for that house sitting where it's at. Even if I was to lot it off and say, here,
Right.
I'm going to sell my house, the rest of the stuff's around it will not bring what they say it is. And so I believe they don't have a true comparative, because no one out there has a farmhouse lotted off next to other farm buildings. And so my house is valued differently. It has a different value, I should say, than the one in town, even though it's the same square footage.
I would say, we don't want to complicate it too much. So it needs to be kind of like an assessed value. It needs to be somewhat streamlined. But I could see where, when you go to contest your property taxes, that if you could show receipts on it, just like if you had bought a property and it was assessed at a much higher value than what you paid for it, you can contest that property tax bill based off of what the purchase price was. I believe that's currently how you can contest property tax bills.
You can, but I always feel we're behind the 8 ball on those
Contesting.
contesting.
You are, or I feel that way too.
I've done it before, and I can relate.
Yeah, you just feel like you're losing before you walk in the door.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go back to your scenario, Louie. So you built some grain bins, probably got them done for half of what new would have cost. Just guessing, give or take a little, it's worth half. Are they really worth half of a brand new one? Probably, because they're gonna wear out quicker.
Mhm.
They are. They're gonna rust through quicker. A bolt's gonna break quicker. The doors are gonna break quicker. The hinges are gonna break quicker. So I really do believe they are worth, or should be assessed less than a brand new one. But I don't know if you get away with that. But those are arguments that really need to be valued and respected. I don't disagree with you.
I did go protest the grain set value last year. I believe it was last year. They were quite surprised when the Lynn County supervisor come in to protest Lynn County taxes. But it was well received. There's 5 people with different backgrounds, most of which probably didn't really understand agriculture. One was a farmer, but I brought receipts from my local grain dealer that stated what used bins were worth. And it did make some difference, not as much as I was hoping. Certainly not as much as what I had in, because I don't even have half in them.
Right.
But I bought them bins for basically, virtually I was buying $50,000 or 50,000 bushel bins for $5,000.
Right.
But we had a lot of labor in them. But it was my own labor, so it was kind of catch-22.
So just to throw out there, if you were to build a new bin today per bushel, a bin that the 3 of us would probably build, what would it cost per bushel? I'm out of that market for.
I think it's close to
testing.
$3.
Close to $3.
Yeah, I haven't built a bin for a few years. So
Yeah, and I haven't either. So the last one I built was $1.75. So it's been, and I thought that was terrible because that was nearly twice of the one I built before that.
And the concrete's everything's gone up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Stuff's getting tough to get these. We don't make the steel here anymore, so everything costs more now, especially in today's climate.
Got it. Wow.
Well, I know that there's a lot of controversy over property taxes, and the county actually gets blamed for most of it because that's where our bill comes from. But having said that, oh wow, we're just getting some information that says the cost would be $9 to $10 per bushel. So none of us build a grain bin for.
It's been a while, folks.
We might need to edit this part out if anybody down at the state capitol is listening. So
Well, if you buy them used, it don't cost that much. Anyhow, the county always gets blamed for it because the bill actually comes from the county.
Correct.
In Lynn County, I think between 15 and 17% of that bill actually goes to the county. The rest is your city, if you live in a city, or the school district.
Mm-hmm.
So really, when the legislature is really going to tackle this, somehow they have to tackle that issue. And Lynn County, I'm proud to say that we were a county that did what was the blue? What was that called? Back the blue,
Right.
And we didn't raise property taxes from that, and we actually took mental health off the property taxes, which was the intent of the legislature. That was actually one of the things I was hoping to do while I was there. That was one of my first things. If you remember my great big bill that tackled the world.
I remember.
But you guys did get that done, so I'm looking. That's good, and I think there's other things. I know on the mental health that's on there. I still know Lynn County does pay some money that I don't believe they should because the state took that over, and we are a county that has a mental health access center.
Right.
So all them costs ought to go to the state, and they're not doing that just yet, but they're working on it more all the time. And I know other counties don't always agree to that, but Delaware County, you're coming to Cedar Rapids if you need a mental access center.
Correct.
Or Johnson County.
Correct.
Along with the other
regions
surrounding
were developed.
Yeah. So I think there's things that you guys are tackling, but I'm appreciative as a person that farms in the middle of 3 counties. If it could be same rules, that's not all bad. I often say that local government is state government for me in where I live. So, and I know that this is an ongoing issue, and I kind of, Elliott's in my intent is that we'll have you on later after session's over, and we'll see where these actually went.
All right.
These bills. So next, I'd like to maybe tackle right of first refusal.
Okay.
You can maybe explain what that is, and then we'll, I don't know where Elliott stands on it, honestly,
Yeah,
don't,
I
but
honestly
I know
don't
where
know a
I
lot
stand
about
on
it,
it, and
so.
it's not where you stand on it, so,
Uh,
which is fine.
Yeah, that's a fair conversation, Louie. So right of first refusal is a direct correlation with our power line companies, our folks that move those the electrical transmissions around. And so the concept is the company that's now operating and maintaining your power lines, the ones that run out in front of your buildings, has the right of first refusal on continuing to take care of that power line. That's the concept. And so I compare it to those of you that farm. If you're renting a farm that consistently gets put up for bids, if you're farming it today, you get that right of first, if your landlord so inclined, that if he would offer you right of first refusal, that the other neighbor farmers could say, I'll be at X, X, and X, and X, and you as the current tenant can come and say, okay, the high bid is X. If you want to match that, it's yours. If you want to walk away from it and not match that, you can walk away, and then you've lost your right of first refusal, and the guy that gets it now would have that option for the next time, if that's the way the tenant has that. Well, this would apply to the folks that are taking care of our power lines.
So is it taking care of or building new?
My understanding of the way the bill is today, now it's in the governor's energy bill, is it would be both. So if they're involved with developing a new transmission line to go to the new service area, new housing development in the edge of town, a new business is going to build over there, that they would have the opportunity to have the last opportunity to say, I'm willing to do it for that, or walk away from it.
Right. Just for clarity, who do you get your power from at the farm?
So I have on the farm from a Maquoketa Valley REC out of Anamosa.
Okay. You're not an Alliant customer.
I am a Alliant customer on one piece of property, but it's pretty minimal.
Okay.
I struggle with the first refusal piece a little bit, and as a buyer, I've always wanted that privilege of first refusal. In the comparison where being a tenant, yeah, absolutely. If the tenant could have the first refusal, that'd be great. But there's some value lost as like the owner of that property, or even maybe the taxpayers in this situation, where are they getting the best value proposition if they're in placing that right of first refusal on the vendor?
So this is where we can get into the debate. And I've been supportive of right of first refusal, so I'm just going to be clear, and I'm getting the sense you guys are not. The theory behind it is, okay, they know the system. They are a big enough company that if they need to get it done quick, they have enough resources. They're familiar with it. They can get it done quickly and build it well, and get that project completed. Where a new person has to come in and figure that out. And so, is that the best value for the customer? Possibly. If someone bids it way lower, say, hey, I can do this a whole lot cheaper, and the current operator of that system says, I can't do it for that, then there's an opportunity for them to walk away. But those decisions are the ones that have to be made.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm an Alliant customer.
I hope you got a big billfold.
Well, I don't, and that's probably why I'm against this. Alliant is a high-priced electric company. I have both. I also have Maquoketa Valley REC, so I can see the difference. Alliant, I believe, sold all their lines to ITC because I have a line item on there that part of my rate goes to ITC already. And I don't have a problem with what you're saying on the smaller end of it where for instance, they're going to run a new line out to a new housing development. They already have the line a half mile down the road, a mile down the road, whatever. Or we had a neighbor that wanted three-phase a few years ago, and they brought three-phase up from his neighbor a couple miles away. He had to pay for it. But and then if other neighbors hook onto it, then he gets part of that back. I'm not talking about those type of power lines though, because I understand that part of why you'd let the same people that are maintaining them build them. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the big power lines that we see going across the state now that feed or take the energy from the windmills, solar farms.
Oh, the ones that look like Wile E. Coyote that's been electrocuted?
Yeah.
Those big ones.
Those big ones, yeah. Okay. And I think that is going to significantly raise our costs if we don't give that a bid process.
So, Louie, we're going to have a fair discussion here. There is a bid process. So all the companies have the opportunity to say, okay, we're going to build this new big power line to get from the substation to the new development or the new big Google center. They all get a chance to bid on it, but the current operator gets the right of first refusal.
Well, then maybe I'm not looking at right of first refusal the same way you are, because I see that as not really a bid process, in my opinion. They come in and say, we're going to build this for X, and they get the job unless somebody wants to do it for less.
So there's like a barrier. There's almost a barrier for competition. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't think you'll have as many companies come in and do that. And I know I was against it when I was in the House. It did pass. the Supreme Court matter, I don't know if it was 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later, threw it out. And so it seems to be one of them bills that never dies. There's several of them. This would be added to it. And I guess for today's purposes, I maybe don't understand it all. And we're just going to agree to disagree. But
and that's good, Louie. And we have those same debates in the legislature. And,
Sure.
and so I'm glad you bring it up, because those are the very questions and situations that come up before you vote to say this is a good idea or this is a bad idea. And I'm still leaning on the side that this is a good idea.
okay, well, that'll be one that I don't agree with you on, but that's okay. That's how the world goes around. And, you can't always be right, so I pity you. But, that's just how it is. I had to get that in first. You would have pitied me.
Well, you'll come around, Louie.
All right, fair enough. I guess we'll move on. Another one that I have down is this goes back to energy. Energy is really important to me. Coming from Lynn County, we have what is, I think it's online now, the largest solar farm in Iowa, out at Duane Arnold. We could go through all that. We were both hoodwinked on that from guess who.
Yes, we were.
Yep.
Are you
And
talking about shutting down Duane Arnold out there? Or are you talking about?
it all rolls in together. So they gave us assurances that Duane Arnold was going to be open for 3 to 5 years.
Mhm.
And within 30 days after session, Senator Zumbach and I because it was in our district, got notice that they were closing in 3 years.
Yep.
The short end of it was even 3 years. It was
It
a
was
short
short.
period,
It was
way
short.
shorter than what they'd told us. So maybe I think they told us it was 5, plus they had a re-up for 25 years.
And they just couldn't afford to keep it running. That was their statement.
Yep,
just
that was their
too
statement.
expensive.
And so they closed it. A lot of people have a misbelief that it closed because of the derecho. It did not close because of the derecho. It was going to close early anyway. It did close 3 months earlier than the plan, which was October. I think it closed then in August because of derecho, but it did not close because of derecho. And it was because they didn't need the power.
At that time.
Right. And within 3 months after that, they're going in front of the IUB wanting to build a solar farm.
Mhm.
That this is Next Air Energy, that they got tax credits to build. So I've always said that I used to think
Federal tax credits.
federal tax credits. I always thought that they were a poorly run business, but actually in the business sense, this is brilliant. You get tax credits to build your solar farm, at which then after you get it built, you sell it to a utility that is regulated by the IUB and guaranteed 9% profit. So it really doesn't matter what they pay for it. They're guaranteed 9%. And as a farmer, I'd have a new tractor out at my farm every time it needed washed if I had guaranteed 9% profit. I mean, why would I want to spend time washing it?
Right.
So they turned around and sell it to Alliant Energy. Then fast forward, Alliant Energy is also in the business of buying ground and building things on it. So they own a bunch of ground out by the Cedar Rapids Airport that they're selling, or I don't know if they've got it done yet, but they got, what are they called? Google
It's a data center.
data centers. And now all of a sudden they take a lot of power. So what do we want to do? Oh, let's possibly open Duane Arnold back up.
Mhm.
Which I'm not against opening Duane Arnold back up, but I just want to stress the point that it should have never been closed in the beginning, and the need for the solar farm was really never there, other than a dash for the tax credits.
Well, look, they were chasing the green theory.
Right.
That's what they were chasing. And they thought all their customers were going to be happy if we would shift from nuclear, which they didn't assume was green. And they thought we're going to chase wind turbines and solar farms. And that didn't pan out as well as they had hoped, because people realized it just is not economical to run those types of energy.
And count on it.
Count on, right? Not dependable, inefficient. I'm sorry, it just does not work. So my personal feelings are going to come out clear here. I think solar farms, wind turbines are the most inefficient, ineffective, bad energy policy that we ever developed. That's my honest opinion. Then there's always a however. And so, Elliott, you're looking at me like, where is he going to go with this one?
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a former senator that's dad really struggled through the 80s. Okay? And during that time frame, he was going to lose a farm. We all know those years were tough. And he had an opportunity to put some wind turbines up in the 1980s. And he did. And the income from those wind turbines saved his farm. He was able to keep together, had this new off-farm income source from those wind turbines. And after I heard that story, it didn't change my dislike for wind energy, but it also made me think about alternative sources of income for farmers should be seriously considered and not automatically excluded just because I personally hate that certain income source. It made me look at it differently.
I don't disagree with much of what you said. I disagree with the tax credits. And ironically, there's now a tax credit that came with the Biden administration for nuclear. So I'm sure that helped why. I mean, I've been quoted saying before that if gerbils on a wheel was the new tax credit for energy, that's what everybody would want, is gerbils on a wheel. But I do agree that private property rights, which we're going to get to that here in a little bit too, do weigh in there. I agree with that. And on a personal note, I was actually, as I was stepping down from being a county supervisor, I was considering, because we were working on wind ordinances in Lynn County, and I thought, if that ever came to me, would I be interested in putting some turbines up? And I really thought I would be. And I had 5 in mind where I could put them in a line with my neighbor. We could put them on the fence row, so one of us could have the road, one of us could have the turbine maybe. And I didn't talk to my neighbor yet, but I was kind of considering that. And one day I got a call from some people from Mechanicsville that had 2 wind turbines. They took the shiny penny early. They'd been there for 12 years out of a 30-year contract, 12 and 13. Both of them have been hit by lightning. They had, I didn't believe it until I was there, they had probably 650 acres. They probably weren't stretching it, of various amounts of fiberglass strewn all over. Of course, it was worse the closer you were, because as it was burning, it was shedding it. They just have a real mess. They've imploded one and brought it down. Now they have cement chunks all over. But after seeing that and listening to their story, because they were on board when it first came up, and now they're like, what do we do? The company is owned by somebody in a foreign country. It's just a real mess for them. And after seeing that, I decided, well, I'm not interested in that on my own farm. And our local ordinance, in which maybe the state could consider if they ever do state versus local, we put in a bond that they need a bond for decommissioning, but they also need a disaster bond that's separate to cover the cost of cleaning them messes up. So that kind of, and the reason I put this on there is there was a bill early on that never made funnel that actually took the local control of those sites and gave it to the state. And like I said, it didn't make funnel, but I know I called you pretty hot over it one day, and you talked about some things that I'm not saying I would change my mind, but you certainly made me consider it. If you remember that day, you talked about having one set. You talked about the matrix for pork.
Correct, for livestock.
Yep, and we're putting it in that perspective. And so I would have to say personally, I kind of like what you told me, and you and I think a lot alike on a lot of issues, and I like what you told me. And if it would come out with the Dan Zumbach rules, I would be 100% behind it. But I'm scared of what the details would look like, because I'm 100% for private property rights. I understand that. I want to have my own property rights. But also, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And so if I sold you or Elliott an acreage off a farm I bought, the way it sits right now, I can put a solar farm right up behind you, or a windmill. Well, I think a windmill has some setbacks, but it's not a long ways away. You know personally from that.
Yeah, it's far enough that if they tip over, they're not supposed to hit you.
Okay, but you can still hear the whoosh every.
Oh, horrible! Yeah. You hear the squeal and the whoosh.
Yeah,
I got a question on this, especially talking windmills and solar farms. My big concern is, how do we keep that profit that these off-farm income sources are producing locally? So it's today different than the 80s. We have a lot of out-of-state ownership of farmland here. How do we get to where the local people are able to profit from these operations and keep that money local, where, the instances where I know of these solar farms going up, it's typically not local people that are profiteering from this. And so are there any provisions in this that try to keep some of these profits produced off of these acres here in Iowa?
So there's about 3 layers of this whole wind turbine conversation that needs to be peeled back. It's a stinky onion, and we need to peel some of these layers back. One, the solar thing's been going on so long that the cat's kind of out of the bag on the solar, because they're everywhere. Drive down Interstate 80, drive down US 20, 30, pick one. There's wind turbines everywhere. And my understanding, they're in over half the counties now. So I'm going to go back to the matrix comment that you made, Louie.
And I don't think our listeners, I don't really know this matrix.
Okay,
thing,
so the master matrix is a set of rules statewide of where and how livestock facilities can be placed, and the concern back then, and this has been nearly 20 years ago, was we don't want to have a county by county set of rules, because some urban counties could say no hog buildings, no livestock. Well, that was really going to devalue farms in those counties. And so we came up, not me, I wasn't there at the time, but they came up with a system, said the setbacks, the locations, the number of pigs, all those things that come in, and it's hogs and cattle, any livestock facilities, has to be X. And people could come complain to your county supervisors, but if that farmer followed the matrix, he could put that livestock facility there. Okay, so that's the story on livestock. Getting back to wind turbines, here's the difference. Those livestock facilities are tax deductible over time. Your gating, your expenses, you can deduct them off their taxes. Because some people want to say, well, it's just a different type of income, no different than livestock. But it is different because, yes, they can deduct off their taxes their expenses for building that wind turbine, but they also get a tax credit for building them. And so it's not the same. They're really not the same type of a off-farm income as livestock is. And that livestock, let's face it, those dollars spin over and over and over again in a county and in a state. The employment you have, the feed milling, the trucks themselves, the processing, the food consumption at the grocery store. Livestock is an amazing generator for income for the state of Iowa and all the people that live there. Wind turbines are different. A lot of the income is going to an owner out of state. Now, the one income farmers do get is a rental of that property, and it's pretty good. And so if your local farmer owns that land, he's getting a pretty nice check for renting that property to have that wind turbine placed. There's a farm sold right across the road from me recently. They sold the farm to a semi-local farmer, but he carved out the road and the wind turbine off that farm, and he's an out-of-state landowner, and he's keeping the income from that wind turbine now and shipping that income out of state. And so I got to look at it, hear it, watch the flicker go across my house, and all those dollars now are going out of state.
So there's no property tax going to the school from it or anything?
So I don't know how much property tax abatement they got to build it. And so I'm not real well versed on how much property tax is coming back into the local economy. Some, but I know they were abated a lot of the property tax costs just to lure them into the county.
Are we doing anything though on the state level to where we're trying to advantage people that live here that can take advantage of, like the story of the guy in the 80s where he could be the principal owner of it? Are we doing anything like that here?
Really not any new policies other than what we've had in the past. But this is why the quote-unquote matrix concept of wind turbines came into play. Said, okay, are we hating wind turbine or solar farms, or are we looking at opportunity for all counties to have a wind turbine? So Elliott, you're in a county right next to me. Delaware County's got them spotted all over now. There's 23 of them right next to my farm, within 2 miles of my farm. I mean, they're polka dotted horribly. And you go a mile and a half into your county, there's none, and there can be none because the local supervisor says, I don't want any. Okay, so that's fair for the guys that don't want one. The county says nope, and they're happy. But I've got phone calls from your county saying, hey, I'd like that income from a wind turbine, and can't you do something at the state level to allow me to have that opportunity on my farm? But your county supervisor is saying no. So we threw it out there, said, hey, for all these new energy process, we could have a statewide policy so that you individually can say yes or no. But the way it sits today, if your county supervisors say no, the answer is no.
What about like prohibiting some of the, like your instance across the street from you where we put some restrictions on that so people in Iowa get the advantage of it as opposed to out of the state investors?
We don't have anything now, so we already know that. But I'll tell you one of the conversations that never happened. So I don't have one on my farm. I don't like them. But my attitude about them has changed because I have to look at them, I have to listen to them, and I have that flicker across my house. And you come into my yard this June and get that massive headache from that flick constantly every 3 seconds, depending on the wind speed. And so now here I am. I have to do all those negative things. Look at them, hear them, see them, watch the flicker, and I can't participate. Or I'm not participating, but there's no opportunity. So now if they're in so thick, I wish I had one on my farm so I could collect the income because I got to put up with all those other things already. So it's an ugly scenario.
So that goes back to the Lynn County ordinances a little bit. I know you were there at the one night I proposed a 1,200-foot setback that mimicked the matrix. You took it to the Senate, or maybe you did it first and I did it second. I don't quite know. I'm not trying to take credit, but it was done. I know the Senate didn't take it up. But in full disclosure, I do have 2 pipelines. And I'm a firm believer that most everybody has a price. Mm-hmm. And so when I called you kind of in an uproar that you were going to take it away from local supervisors, and you started explaining some of the things you just did, I guess I'm not so against the state taking it over as long as there's big provisions to keep it away from people's houses, whether it's solar or wind. Or they can negotiate the difference. And the problem is how that's written and what the details are and what that looks like.
The details are always the way things happen or don't happen in the Iowa legislature.
Right.
May and shall are 2 different worlds.
Yeah, devil in the details.
It is true. So let's talk a little bit about solar. There's no noise. Okay? That's not a problem. They're butt ugly. We all know that. And those of us that farm just don't appreciate looking at a bunch of glass compared to looking at a crop growing. And the real problem I see with solar is bad storms. Okay? And we've all seen a tornado. We've all had buildings, I assume, at some point in time of our lives that got scattered across the farm, and watch what tornadoes do. Could you imagine that much glass scattered across your farm? Not the farm that solar farms are, but you next to it. And the ability to clean that up ever is nearly zero. That glass is going to be there forever. That causes a real problem, especially if you're a livestock farmer, if you're baling hay. Similar to the fiberglass from the wind turbines you were talking on. And so setbacks are important. At least get the majority of the product to stay on the farm where that actual farm is, whether it's a wind turbine or a solar farm. So setbacks are important. We don't have that today.
Right. My other disagreement, especially with solar, because it takes a massive amount of ground. It takes a massive amount of money to build them. And so I don't live near Palo. That's where it's at. I live on the other side of the county, basically. However, I'm an Alliant customer, and so I'm not against solar. I have it on my farm, but I own it, and it's mine, and it does lower my bill. It lowers it a lot. It lowered it without any tax credits. I mean, it just did, partially because I'm an Alliant customer, and Alliance costs so much to start with. But my problem is I'm paying for the one over there at Palo, this exorbitant amount of money. It's not going to save anybody a dime. It's costing us money to have that thing put in. And in my opinion, the IUB is just kind of ignoring that. There's not a rate increase that they hardly don't allow.
So a lot of people want to throw the IUB under the bus because they're an obvious entity that you could, but their job is to ensure everyone follows the law. And that's the part that they get caught into, is the law quite often allows those exorbitant.
And I was told that when I was in the House.
Yeah, so that's part of it. But let's talk about Alliant Energy and an REC. Let's just talk the difference of those 2 entities. So an REC is owned by you and I, Elliott. We're part of our co-op, and if you look at our electric bills from REC, in the entire nation, some of the lowest rates of anywhere. Iowa, we've got it here. We have low cost energy in our REC. So let's just throw a compliment out to them. Now, Alliant's pretty dependable too, but they have a whole different system. They're not owned by you and I. They're owned by investors. And so Alliant has to make their investors happy. And their rates are higher. Now, quite often you can get some sort of a discount off that rate, like your solar rate, but across the board, that line at the bottom of the page, it will be higher, without question, with Alliant Energy than it will be with any one of the RECs that encircle them. And what frustrates me is we can't do anything about making them come into line the way our RECs bill their rates out. It's a problem. If you're an Alliant customer, you're stuck, and you can't leave Alliant either. You're stuck with them.
I'd like to see it deregulated, but that's a long ways off. But is there anything that they could do to make them stay in the energy business versus in the land development business? And if you go back to the 90s, and you can look this up on your own, I know you and I talked about, if you remember, they actually had resorts in South America that they lost, I think, $90 million. I don't know what that'd equate back to now, but it didn't work out for them. And they're buying all this land around. I'm sure they're doing it other places, but around Cedar Rapids to put these data centers in. I mean, what's that have to do with providing energy? And they're supposed to be an energy company. And secondly, I got a 2-point question. If they are going to stay in that, isn't that the investor's responsibility to get into that, to be into that stuff, and not the rate users?
So, Lou, I don't know enough details of where Alliant Energy is on what they're purchasing, what they're not. So I really can't comment with any level of knowledge to say this is good, bad, or different, or what's really happening.
Fair enough.
So I just can't go down that road. But I do agree with you that they need to be more responsible on what they're servicing and what they're charging for that service compared to their neighbors.
So on the property, it was ag land. It's coming out of ag land. Is it commercial property tax then at that point, or how are they taxing these solar farms?
So that's my understanding, that when it becomes a commercial project, that facility is charged tax at that commercial rate, even though the farm ground around it is still ag land. But I'm going to backtrack. Elliott, you brought something up a little bit that as a legislator, so I got to take my farmer hat off and put my legislator coat on. We have a statewide responsibility to preserve Iowa farmland. Okay, let's just get down to a little bit of the emotional side of this and the reality of it all. I have a real problem with covering up square 160s, one right after another, and covering that with glass. Just because there's only 2 places in the world where we have soils like this. And why should we be covering it with glass? That I have an ethical problem with. And there's a lot of people say, hey, they can do whatever they want, it's their property. But really, when we have a constitutional responsibility to preserve Iowa's farmland, and I think we need to keep that as part of every equation.
I think that's a great point. And then, as knowing that I'm going to have to provide for my community for many years to come, I really struggle with if we're going to allow somebody to come in, take farming opportunity away from somebody that's going to live here, export that production and the dollars that come from that production, and then bear a bigger burden to support my community on my shoulders because now there's less of that land available for farmers here. How are we going to continue to support these communities when less of that value that's produced off this land is staying here?
So we have 2 things that are doing the exact thing you're talking, Elliott. One is CRP. Okay, this wonderful concept of CRP, that we're preserving our soil and we're taking it out of production and we're making butterflies fly and boy, it all sounds good. Every one of those pieces of ground do not sustain a new young farmer. It's kind of a community reduction program, you could call it, because who's going to be there when it's not there to be operated? And solar farms are doing the same thing.
Timber reserve maybe is the second.
Timber reserve is a whole nother concept. They're not contributing to the county. You still got to maintain the road. You still got to run an ambulance by. Still got to run a sheriff by. Still got to run a fire truck by. But they're contributing 0, which means your neighbor's paying too much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was at a forum 2 weeks ago, I believe. Well, you were actually there up in Balltown. And that was brought up, and there were some people that obviously had timber in the timber reserve and not paying any property tax at all, right?
Correct.
And that doesn't seem right, because if they follow the deer stand out there, they're still going to get an ambulance to come. They're still going to get police protection if they got people strolling across their farm that shouldn't be. I mean, they still utilize assets. And so I'm on board with you that they should have some level of.
Well, there's a state that I found really interesting. If you want 0 tax on your timber, then it's available to the public. And if you want to get a timber reserve person ready to pay some tax in a hurry, just say it's 0. That's fine, but then the public can come tromp on your ground. They're pretty willing to pay $3-4 an acre.
Sure, I believe that.
And so we got to motivate these folks that 0 is the wrong answer, and I'll stand on that order. 0 is the wrong answer for property tax.
Well, all these issues can be contentious. It just depends what side you're on. And I know for the wind and the solar, because I've sat on both sides as a state rep and as a county supervisor, and it's hard to balance it, especially when you're a farmer. You throw that in there yet, because I totally believe in private property rights. But there's always the just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And I'm still going to always be on the side of having a big setback that's negotiable.
Mhm.
That way, maybe 1,200 foot's too much. Maybe it's 1,000. Maybe it's 800. But I don't think it should be any less than 800. That's not very far when you really think of it. It's a lot if you live in town,
Louis,
but it's not when you live out in the country.
Let's compare to this something that you and I can both relate to. If you're spraying your crop, okay, and you get overspray onto the neighbor, there was no ill intent. You didn't plan on it happen. Wind changes, humidity changed, it happened. The first thing you do is you call your insurance company and say, hey, there's a problem here, or he calls you, lets you know, and you resolve it. So you had a negative effect on your neighbor, and you corrected it, probably with insurance. Okay? That's a good place to be. You weren't trying to hurt their property, but you did, and you fixed it. The problem is with a solar panel next to you, you now have devalued your property because the next guy who want to buy it, he doesn't want that glass right next to him. And so his property rights trumped your property rights. Or if you don't allow him to put them on there, now your property rights are trumping his property rights. It's a tough thing to balance out.
That's why I think if you had a decent sized setback that can be negotiable, most people, not all, but most people can be inconvenienced for money. Mm-hmm. And I believe that would just take a lot of the contention away. I know in the one, there was 2 solar farms in Lynn County. One's up and running. The other one, I'm not sure what's going to happen with it. But I do know in the course of that meeting, the 8 people that lived around it were affected were willing to work with the solar company. And I believe the solar company was willing to work with them until they knew they had 2 supervisors on board and didn't need to. And then that all went away. But they were willing to accept that it was going to happen, that it was the property rights of the people wanting it, putting it up, and that they had rights also. And I think there could have been a much nicer negotiation than what it ended up being. And now, like I said, I don't even know where that one's ending up in today. And
yeah, I'm familiar with the one you're talking about, Louie, and it really has kind of slid away. But part of it is I think there's now a new, what I would call more negative picture of solar. I think society is saying, I'm not sure this is really such a good idea. It looked really good in a book, but not so good next to me.
The number of people that have told me, have you drove over to Palo lately? I thought it was just going to be on the power plant owned about 500-600 acres. Yeah. And they first sold it that was only going to be on their property. And the number of people that come back from there and like, boy, I didn't know it was going to be like that.
Well, now that Teslas are burning, everybody's got a little different perspective. Yep. Well, Dan, it's been an exciting first hour, and we still got a lot of topics to discuss. So, listeners, please tune in next week for the other half of our podcast with Dan Zumbach.
I want to thank you too, Dan, for coming out and spending some time with us. And I want to thank the audience and rush back for another exciting episode of Rush Hour Ag.